Welcome to this overview over Kant's Transcendental aesthetic. I won't go into space and time so much as looking at how Kant builds up towards the Transcendental aesthetic in his first critique. Now here's a quote from the first introduction to the first critique from Kant. Experience, Erfahrung in German, is without doubt the first product that our understanding brings forth as it works on the raw material of sensible sensations. So experience is a product of the understanding. Thus opens the introduction to the first edition of the first critique. Yet we should not conflate our everyday understanding of experience with the term Erfahrung, of which Kant here speaks. Experience in the relevant sense is neither empirical fact nor personal experience. Instead, thinking, or rather the moment of thinking called the understanding, so understanding is a logical moment, produces experience. This is to say, experience is a logical form that necessarily binds itself to the manifold, a priori. If experience were primarily or even purely empirical, as Hume maintains, it would remain stuck on the level of mere contingency, as Kant points out. Thus, for example, space is not derived at empirically, but is posited by Kant as an a priori necessary condition or form of intuition to experience any spatial body. Hence, space and time must of necessity be a priori conditions. None of what the first critique brings to the trial is to describe in any way any personal or existential experience of something by someone in the world. Instead, what is being negotiated, what is at stake, and what Kant brings to the trial, as it were, to court with his transcendental philosophy, is, quote, the idea of a science for which the critique of pure reason is to outline the entire plan architectonically, that is to say from principles, with a full guarantee for the completeness and certainty of all the components that comprise this edifice. This is a quote from Kant. So he is after principle positings, not an epistemology, not what it means to have an ordinary experience, etc., but the principle positings that make possible any scientific and replicable experience in the first place. The word idea here does indeed speak from a similar realm, let's say, as Plato's idea. The idea, however, has relocated to the inwardness of the human subject. That is to say, the idealism that here is attempted, as here laid out, is a cracking open, let's say, in a poetic sense, of a transcendental realm. And it first trials in the purely transcendental, that is to say, in the sphere of pure necessary principle positings that necessitate a priori in the realm of consciousness any access to the objectivity of the world before experience. This pure form of thought is hence already relational to or towards content, more precisely to the content of the manifold. But it is purely about that relation and not so much about the content itself. Kant does not describe to us how an experience actually unfolds or works, but all the necessary conditions that need to be in place for any experience in the first place, and also the forms of intuition, time and space, and how they need to be in place and why they have to be in place in the first place. The attempt is thus to secure transcendentally, which again supersedes and precedes all experience, to secure in this manner the architecture of the logical form by which the manifold is ordered. This evidently shows that the faculties of cognizing are not to be negotiated. The first critique bursts, let's say, into a more fundamental realm. It is only a first critique and does not yet constitute the entire quote-unquote system of transcendental philosophy. Hence here also the question of what something is in itself, in its essence, is no longer the focus, as it was still with Greek ontology or Greek metaphysics, Even though Kant wishes to return to appearances and their content, ousia is not up for negotiation, the essence of something. The specific presence and essence of something particular and its appearing is not at the center. For Kant attempts to construct actuality, Wirklichkeit, scientifically we could say, without contradiction, without inherent oppositionality or resistance. In this sense, Kant remains on the plane of a formal logic, and hence his project ultimately amounts also to a certain degree to a constructivism. In order to establish again the unity of being and thought, where thought now means representation, Vorstellung, that is the active placing before oneself through the faculty of the imagination, things in themselves do not fall within experience. That there are things in themselves is a metaphysical assertion, one which critical thought does not permit. All one can affirm is that one can act as if things in themselves existed in the noumena, which is already saying too much if we speak of the noumenal realm, to be honest. So what we have access to through the a priori forms of intuition, space and time, more precisely what the logical form of transcendental perception is directed at, is the sphere of the phenomenal. The manifold of our perception is not sense data, which are subsequently ordered by the human mind. Instead, the manifold in principle, but not qua data, serves the purpose to uphold the identity of consciousness, since the manifold is posited as that which in principle, logically, not structurally, is that which relates back to the pure form of sensual intuitions. Hence, when Kant, as he does, speaks of Sinnlichkeit, of sensation or sensibility or sensuality, depending on the translation, he does not speak of sense perception, of some available empirical sense data. Instead, what he means by Sinnlichkeit, by sensibility or sensation, is a logical form of the interrelationality between our perception and what is potentially percepted. Similar to Aristotle, when Kant speaks of matter, hyle in ancient Greek, Kant, as Aristotle, does not address some formless stuff floating about in space. Instead, matter is an ideal concept in Aristotle. And matter in its ideality for Kant is also what allows for the establishment of the relation between appearance and sensation. What we see here is a first attempt at grounding again the relationship between subjectivity and objectivity and their relationality. It is important to stress the character of ideality and principality even of the transcendental aesthetic. Yeah? So when Kant addresses time and space, he's not addressing how we think of time and space as clock time or the space that I'm in, the place that I'm in, etc. None of this is really what's at stake at all. So we need to ward off any such empiricist or phenomenological existential claims or associations that we might have with it. And instead, the term here aesthetics, is taken from Baumgarten, whose work, especially on metaphysics, was very dear to Kant. Aesthetics, which has an ancient Greek origin and is this invented by Baumgarten, means perception. Yes, it's the science of perception, we could say. It does not have to do very much with beauty, as what it comes to be called now. But here we also have to be very clear that this is in Kant's terms, it's about the science of perception a priori. So even though it addresses sensual perception, it addresses that only as a possibility and the necessary conditions that make that experience possible before the experience. Again, purely in principle terms. Thus Kant writes, quote, I call a science of all principles of sensibility a priori the transcendental aesthetic, end of quote. The investigation of sensibility a priori shows that there are two forms of sensual intuition, space and time. And if you're interested in reading Kant more closely with me and figuring out and understanding really this principle way of transcendental thinking, which is so fundamental to the scientific worldview and to any post-Kantian philosophy, really. If you're interested in Hegel or Marx or accelerationism in phenomenology, etc., Kant is absolutely fundamental. Then I hope that you will join me at my Kant course. The link to enroll is in the description of this video. Thank you very much indeed.